Last week, all eyes were on Texas as an extreme winter storm tormented the Lone Star State, resulting in more than a dozen people perishing in their home without access to heat. But how did this happen? Quite simply because of greedy oil tycoons and their favourite political playthings, that's how. Yet it goes back a lot further than you think. For scientists and climate change activists, this catastrophe unfortunately did not come as a surprise. In fact, 10 years ago, energy regulators actually warned Texas's privatised and deregulated energy companies that they were extremely vulnerable to winter storms. They warned them that this tragedy would happen unless changes were made, and yet these warnings fell on deaf ears, and thus this tragedy was unfortunately a needless ticking time bomb. So the storm rolled in, equipment froze at the local power plants, and approximately half of Texas's electricity generating capacity went offline. Next, the natural gas wells iced over, which meant the gas supplies intended to heat homes in winter were extremely limited, and this in turn resulted in hundreds of cases of carbon monoxide poisoning being reported as Texans turned on their own generators to warm up. So why did these privatized energy companies ignore these warnings? Why would they put millions of people at risk of freezing to death in the middle of winter? Surely they're not just evil capitalist bastards, right? Yeah, well, wrong, because they are evil capitalist bastards. Last week's tragedy meant a boom for a handful of privatized energy companies that managed to keep going throughout the freeze. In fact, according to The Guardian, the president of leading gas company Comstock Resources described this tragedy as like hitting the jackpot in terms of their earnings. Families froze, people died, and yet it was like hitting the jackpot. So prices surge and rich Texans pay the increases in order to stay in their lovely warm homes, well, except for a few that duck across the border to Mexico. Yet on the flip side of this, poorer households are cut off and they freeze. It is that simple and that fucking evil. But let's take a step back here. Why did Texas deregulate their energy industry to begin with? Surely it didn't happen at the hands of, I don't know, a politician with ties to oil, right? I mean, they couldn't be that obvious with their stupid, devious plot. Could they? Enter stage left George W. Bush, 1999, the GOP Texas governor and presidential candidate who signed the deregulation legislation. Early on in George W.'s career, he had heavily focused on oil exploration in his home state of Texas, while his equally as charming running mate Dick Cheney was an executive for oil giant Halliburton. In other words, these two were big oil's wet dream. Adding fuel to the fossil-fueled fire, let's not forget that ExxonMobil's significant contributions to Bush's election campaign essentially resulted in him becoming the president of the United States. Interesting. What we saw in Texas is yet another example of the extreme divide happening in America. A divide fueled by COVID-19, by mutinous politics which pushes individualism, by the disproportionate effects of climate change. All these factors result in one thing: the rich getting richer and the poor getting dead. What has worked before in terms of adapting to our climate changing will not work in the future. The time for discussing needed systemic change is obsolete. We are now at the stage where we have to implement these changes to our institutions in order to guarantee the way in which we can freely access our fundamental human rights. Yet too many politicians and too many businesses are unwilling to change because they are greedy motherfuckers who can't look past their own privilege as they chortle to racist jokes on their privately run golf courses. And with these greedy, repulsive politicians and businesses are the far too many lower income constituents who have been fed a lie. Texans have been on the receiving end of multiple natural disasters stemming from climate change, yet Texas Republicans are still 100% a Green New Deal that would help the bulk of their people. In fact, this guy actually blamed Texas's power failure on wind and solar getting shut down, which is so dumb for a number of reasons. One, as fossil fuel energy is 6 times larger than renewables in Texas. So how can you blame it on one little part when deregulated oil tycoon motherfuckers are joyfully exclaiming they've hit the jackpot? And two, the reality of wind turbines is that when they are properly weatherized, which they were not in Texas, they operate perfectly well in conditions much colder than Texas. Places like Sweden or even Antarctica and Iowa, where more than 40% of Iowa's electricity comes from wind. What has happened in Texas is a tragedy, a needless, greed-driven tragedy. It is a tale of how oil tycoons and their favorite government playthings continue to get rich from climate change while continuing to deny it. It is a forewarning tale of our immediate future unless we make substantial changes. 2022, vote those fuckers out.